With Eric Bailey and Eli Lederman, this is Guerin Emig, Tulsa World Sports Writers, all of us talking about the Oklahoma Sooners, all of us. Thanks very much for tuning in. You can catch this on tulsaworld.com every week. You want to watch our pretty faces talk about your favorite team. If you want to just listen to us talk about your favorite team, you can do that by downloading and subscribing to the podcast version via Apple, Google, and Spotify. Gentlemen, the red-white spring game took place on Saturday. Baker Mayfield got his statue unveiled. Brent Venables gave another speech that had fans, in sixth gear, I think, by the end of it. Of those three things, and I'll open it to either one of you, how would you rank them 1 to 3? Game, Mayfield, Venables, fire, and brimstone.
Go ahead, Eli.
Well, I think 1 and 3 might be tied together. Game. Well, I guess there's the game action, but the game and then Brent Venables. You said one speech singular. He had like 3 or 4 on Saturday. I mean, he had the mic in hand, and I guess we can start there. Was that before the ball got kicked off, Brent Venables had the mic in hand. He riled up that massive crowd of 75,000 people, which I think, Eric, you had some conservative estimates on what the crowd might look like late last week, and they completely surpassed that. But yeah, Brent Venables started with an appeal to the crowd and then brought all 250, as it turns out, of those former Sooners, or as many as them could fit around midfield, onto the field. And that, to me, we talked about what this day was going to look like, that it was a kind of a bit of a celebration, I guess, or the start of this, whatever new culture Brent Venables is trying to bring about, between him expressing that to the crowd and then doing it with all those former Sooners there. I mean, I think that was as much a story as anything that happened on the field.
I really thought it was, the Baker Mayfield presentation. I thought it was therapeutic both for Baker Mayfield, who we all know is going through the process with the NFL and where his next home is going to be and what's going to happen at Cleveland, and also for the fans. I mean, they needed something like this. They've had Brent Venables. They've weathered the coaching change and all the unknowns and uncertainties going forward, but then they got to see a familiar face, someone who really, if you think about it, he brought this program back to where it was when he took over in 2015 at quarterback. So I think it was therapeutic both for Baker. He needed those fans, and they showed out for him. I mean, every step he took, he was just the most beloved figure around. So good for Baker, and then good for the fans too, because they got to relive those 2015, 16, and 17 seasons when Oklahoma returned to the elite of college football. So I think the Baker Mayfield thing, the way it just kind of galvanized everyone together, I think that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Eli. Go.
Therapeutic is the word Brent Venables used, and I think maybe the most interesting tidbit was we saw everything that was up front and center, and Baker had his whole weekend of events. But Baker referenced a meeting with Brent Venables, and then Brent Venables kind of gave us this tidbit that Baker had come to him about speaking to the team, not the other way around, and that part of it, getting to tell his story. And, we all know it's been told plenty of times, from Texas Tech all the way to the number 1 pick. But coming back home at this time in Baker's career, where his professional career is in flux, he seemed to think maybe post-NFL draft is when there would be some clarity. That would make sense. But I think coming home for him, having that really warm homecoming and getting a chance to just stand in front of, in that room in front of those players, was exactly like you put it and Brent Venables put it, Eric, therapeutic.
Fellas, maybe this is where we connect the Mayfield situation to current events, and it's something I touched on in the column on Saturday after the scrimmage, and that is that Mayfield continues to have a real magnetism about him, especially when it comes to OU. I'm not sure that's the case in Cleveland anymore with the Browns, but it certainly will always be the case back in Norman. You could feel that in the stadium on Saturday. You could feel that Friday night when they actually unveiled the Heisman in a private gathering of former players and current coaches and players. That's the kind of thing, I get the feeling that you're going to need to see some of, at least to a degree, from Dillon Gabriel, because I do think that if the program's in a better place in terms of wins and losses than it was before Mayfield got a hold of it in 2015. Remember, OU was 8-5 and got blasted by Clemson in the Russell Athletic Bowl in 2014. They just needed to feel better about themselves football-wise. Stoops took it so hard that he fired Josh Heupel, and that's when Lincoln Riley showed up. Okay, that things started to turn back toward the right direction, but a lot of it, I think, can be attributed to not just what Stoops did, not just what Riley did in 15, but what Mayfield did in terms of guidance, right, and influence. OU won 11 games last year, not 8. All right, the Sooners won their bowl game. Wasn't top tier, but at least they won. This isn't a red alert situation on the field, but there is some concern in terms of just transition. We don't know if Brent Venables is going to be a highly successful head coach. We don't know if what worked for Jeff Lebby at Ole Miss is going to work at Oklahoma, or at Lebby with UCF. We don't know if Venables showing up automatically is going to make the defense finally turn the corner, something they kind of sort of did under Alex Grinch, but never completely did. And so you still have a lot of fans, I think, holding their breath. And if you're looking for things to make you feel better about the transition besides Venables' presence, it's got to be the quarterbacks, because there's no other position like Oklahoma starting quarterback at least in this state when it comes to college sports. So what do you think? I mean, is that a bridge too far to connect Mayfield's influence to the potential for Gabriel to do somewhat of the same thing this season?
Guerin, Baker mentioned that he had a chance to talk to Dillon, was really impressed with Dillon Gabriel's leadership skills. And you're right, this program's not in the same spot it was in 2015 when Baker was named the starting quarterback. This program's on really firm footing. We do have the transition, and Jeff Lebby's going to install his offense. But you're a couple steps ahead of where Baker was, because Dillon Gabriel understands what Jeff Lebby's office means. He understands when Jeff Lebby, who was in the press box, he wasn't on the field during the game. He understands what it's like to get on the headset and talk to Jeff Lebby up in the press box, say, okay, what do you see? What's going on? So I really think that they're in really firm footing offensively. The quarterback situation is always going to be something you watch when you're at Oklahoma. And I think the leadership values that Dillon Gabriel built at UCF, 3-year starter, injured last year, I think you can see he's that leader that this offense needs during this transition. Now, defensively, what you mentioned, it's not going to be automatic, nothing seamless. And this isn't going to be seamless. But I think that the familiarity that Sooner Nation has with Brent Venables, I think that's important. I really do. I think they trust him. There's going to be some skepticism because, it's going to take time. But I really think that the foundation has been set really well, both at the quarterback position and defensively. Now, quarterback, I wrote about this earlier in the week. I do think they need to go to the transfer portal just to get some experience. Definitely haven't given up on the players behind Dillon Gabriel in that room. I really personally think Nick Evers is going to be a good quarterback, but he's young. So I think that they really need to find the perfect fit for someone to come in, because as Dillon Gabriel, we learned with him last year, it's just one play away from someone taking over that offense. So I think that's important. But the original question, I think nothing seamless. It is a transition. It'll take a little bit of time. There'll be some growing pains next year, but what I saw at the spring game, it's a good start.
Well, and you've got players talking about numerous players talking about what they noticed early from Gabriel in terms of sort of seizing that position. But Eli, it's one thing for players to talk about it. It's another for Gabriel to show it and to actually have a tangible impact. And we didn't know that about Mayfield until we saw that 2015 season unfold. And then it just built and built over not just that season, but the next two. Gabriel's going to be on a different career track because he doesn't have that kind of eligibility left, but he can still have the same kind of imprint. The question becomes, how does all the talk that we're hearing in the spring manifest to action in the fall?
Yeah, I think, it was impossible not to link those two quarterbacks over the weekend. And in a lot of ways, I think they couldn't be more different. I think Dillon Gabriel has a lot of qualities that may do the same job that Baker Mayfield did in terms of galvanizing and leading and maybe being the spirit of this team, but they're not, he's not Baker Mayfield in terms of the personality. But as we heard all spring, he came in here and right away as a transfer, one of a lot of transfers in an offseason of change, and was the guy that not only, the guys catching his passes we're looking up to and looking to for leadership, but guys on defense. And so he has certainly grab the attention of that group. And I don't know that there's much he can do until the fall to really, I guess, make use of that. Gonna have to apologize for the drills in the background. I've got a lot going on today over here at the Lederman household, but if you can hear me, I think it'll be when this team gets tested in the fall that we'll start to see Dillon Gabriel's quality, those leadership qualities show.
Sure. Eric, you referenced the depth at the position and the fact that Venables is likely. Is that the right way to say it? He's likely to dip into the portal. I mean, is that it's too strong to say foregone conclusion, but somewhere between likely and foregone conclusion?
He said they'll definitely look at something they'll look at. And I think, with the deadline coming up to be eligible, and the strange thing about the portal now is, 3 years ago, if you're in this situation, you don't know what you're going to do because players weren't immediately eligible. So this is something that Oklahoma's learning. I mean, does he get a player that's a younger quarterback, experienced quarterback? Is there an older experienced quarterback that maybe has 1 year left? It's kind of a little bit strategic what you want to do too. And Brent Venables did mention that it has to be a good fit. And it can't be just a player to pick a player that's thrown in college games. It has to be a good fit. And I think that's important in year one when you're building this thing, that, you want to make sure that everyone in that room's comfortable. So I think there's a lot of trust in those quarterbacks with who, if they do bring someone in, there has to be that trust with those existing quarterbacks that they're going to feel comfortable with who they bring in.
Yeah. I think Dave Aranda named Blake Shapen starting quarterback yesterday. Is Gerry Bohanon in the portal yet?
He's not there yet, but I guess we got to give some credit there to Dave Aranda, right? Because he absolutely could have stretched this into August and kind of, for lack of a better term, screwed the guy he's not going to let start. And I think this gives Gerry Bohanon at least a week to consider if he wants to be the backup quarterback at Baylor or enter the portal. And so credit to him in a kind of gross world of college football. That is a little bit of grace and a nice thing.
Yeah,
so
just trying to wonder if we should start building a file of names.
Well, Guerin, if Dave Aranda was Oklahoma's coach, would he have named Kyler Murray starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts starting quarterback in the spring? Would that have happened and left out of summer of mystery in those years?
And that's for another podcast. I tell you what, sometime in June, we're gonna dive into Lincoln Riley's shenanigans when it came to naming Kyler in 18, Hurts in 19, Rattler in 20, and I guess even back to Mayfield in 15, right?
Yeah. Mayfield wasn't. Yeah, exactly.
And he didn't make that a slam dunk. He didn't make anything a slam dunk when it came to the quarterback position. And you read between the lines, we knew darn well why, even if he wasn't going to say it. He wanted to keep the room as deep as possible, and therefore not name a starter as long as possible, so as to tie everyone into the program for the season.
Well, speaking of transfer quarterbacks within the conference, there's no history with Lincoln Riley there, is there?
That's right. No doubt. That's a July podcast.
Okay, put that one in for July.
We're blocking our shows between now and Big 12 Media Days. Some conjecture even among media coming out of the red-white game, guys, about potential exit interviews with the head coach at OU, and then potential results of those interviews, meaning decisions on whether to transfer. And I guess one was made this week. Who wants to tell us about what Cody Jackson did?
Well, Cody Jackson, right after, he had a pretty good spring game, caught 3 passes for 21 yards, got targeted, I think, more than all but 2 other OU receivers. But 2 days later, he jumps into the portal. And I think that's, as Eric alluded to, that's what we're going to see over the next week, really, until May 1. That's when student athletes across the country have to give written notice to their schools that they want to move. And so those exit interviews, you can kind of figure out when schools are doing their exit interviews, because not long after that, you're starting to see guys crop up in the portal. And maybe it's a good sign that has been only one this week. I don't know if that just means we're going to get a flood on Friday or over the weekend, but to this point, there's only been one sooner that jumped to the portal. And I think what that'll be then is that early May, that period is going to be when guys start flooding and making commitments to schools, and when you might see OU start making some of those portal moves that Brent Venables spoke about.
Eric, is there a running back who's next?
It's kind of curious to see what's going to happen at that position. I was really disappointed. We didn't see Marcus Major at running back. And, he was injured this spring. And he's one player we just want to see what he can do. And, Javante Barnes, I was really impressed with him in the spring game. And then, of course, you have Eric Gray, who's the veteran of that group. When you look back at Lincoln's offense, there was always 4 or 5 running backs in that room, and you always wondered, is that too many? But then as attrition goes on, as the year goes on, as injury goes on, 4 or 5 was a good number.
Mm-hmm.
Still learning Jeff Lebby. But you probably could see him picking up some more experience at that position. That's something to keep an eye on, just because, well, Marcus Major is a good example. I mean, he didn't get to play, and if you need that room deep. So that'll be interesting to see that running back position moving forward. I do like the young talent that they have in that room, though, in Major and Barnes, and you have a veteran leader in Gray, but numbers wise, after that, it really drops off. So I think that's the key, is they probably do need someone else at that position just to bring in.
I think to tack onto that point is that we've heard a lot about what this Lebby offense wants to do on the ground, and how a lot of the offense maybe starts there. And while I mean, Javante Barnes was really impressive, and like Eric, I would have loved to have seen Marcus Major. That's three guys really, with Gavin Sawchuk, the other freshman coming in August, but they're probably one running back away from feeling just good and comfortable going into the season. And so to your point, Eric, can they add that guy in May or June? That'd be important.
Here was the best thing that happened on Saturday that no one's talking about. And it was something that didn't have to happen. They didn't have to bring in Jerry Jeff Walker or Clint Black, or help me out, E-period. You're our country music.
Oh yeah, exactly. Although
we didn't have to do the pre-kickoff concert.
Yeah,
make fans draw fans in.
Yeah, and that's funny. And it did it. This thing sold itself. I mean, 75,000 fans. This thing really sold itself. And you had Baker Mayfield. You had it was a perfect storm when you think about everything that came together. But I think it was just the hunger for these fans just to see everything. And you're right. You didn't need to bring a concert, a pregame hour-long concert where they spend, $100,000 or whatever it was. I can't remember the figure, but they spent a lot of money bringing concert acts in. They didn't need that. I mean, this is, kudos for them for trying something different. But this is Oklahoma football. I don't know if you really need a concert to bring it in. Fans proved it this weekend.
Guerin, you and I took that lap before the game, right around the stadium, and it was buzzing around, and folks were going to get in late because there were that many of that.
You're fine. We can hear you. There were more. Here's what I'll say. I predicted 60 all week, and it was beyond what I thought. I don't know if it was 75, but it was closer to 75 than 60, right? So yes, the fans did answer Venables' call for sure. All right. The draft. We should probably hit on the draft. Question I posed in the Monday column and answered. I'll let you guys answer. Who's off the board first in round? I think it'll be round 2. Perrion Winfrey or Nick Benito? I said Winfrey. The 3-draft mock that McShay and Kuiper did for ESPN had Benito going before Perrion. I still think that his Senior Bowl and his anything he did in his workouts, besides the fact that he did really pop on tape, it wasn't consistently that Winfrey popped the last 2 years, but when he did, you could see why you could see him in an NFL uniform a little easier than maybe you could even Benito at edge rush. So I say, Perrion, what say you two?
Go ahead, Eli.
I lean, and maybe this is me, it's not about the draft, and it's more going to be about the next 2-3 years. I lean Nick Benito because I think he maybe projects as a more versatile guy, that maybe there's a team out there that falls in love with him and sees him as this kind of all-purpose outside linebacker edge rusher, and that might do it. But to your point, Guerin, on at least on draft day, it may be all those things you had to say about Perrion Winfrey and what he showed in the Senior Bowl, and he certainly looks the part. And so he may be the first to go, but I have not a hunch, I wouldn't know anything, but that Nick Benito might be a guy that really appeals to some team that looks at him and says he can do a lot for us.
I really like Benito a lot. I really, really do, with everything that he does and bring to the field, his versatility, his athleticism. But I'm gonna go with Perrion Winfrey. But I want a little asterisk to that. It just depends on how Perrion did with his interviews with the teams. He's really going to have to really prove himself as a mature player, how well he did with interviews. And plus, it's the consistency. I mean, he has to play every play 100%. Are you going to get that from him? I'm sure that's what teams are looking at right now. But, man, raw talent. When the carrot was in front of him, when he went in there to the NFL draft, the combine, and Senior Bowl, when he did all that stuff, he really proved himself. He really, really did. And I think that's what's going to inspire teams to really take a deep look at him. I just think it's one of those things where it's just how did he interview and can he stay consistent? I think I'm going to go with Perrion, but like going back to Benito, I've always liked Benito's game ever since especially since he made that interception at Baylor to really lock that comeback win a couple of years ago down. I mean, he's a playmaker, so it's going to be fun to see where these guys get picked.
Yeah, I think both will be on an NFL roster come training camp, and I think both will see the field some, depending upon, of course, need of the team that picks. I actually got into a 7-round mock, and you believe they exist now, and more every year. You see 7-rounders, not just 2 or 3 rounders. One Big 12 kicker was drafted. It wasn't Gabe Burkich. Guys, have any idea who it might have been? Top of your head?
Oh gosh,
Would it have been the guy from Texas Tech?
No.
TCU?
No, the guy with the cool sounding last name for his position. Remember, he had a moniker wherever he went.
Is it Cameron Dicker?
Yes.
Wow.
Cameron Dicker was 6th round, maybe. This is the Sporting News. So if you're saying why, blame it on the Sporting News. But I figure if you're going to draft Dicker, you might as well draft Burkich, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Cameron Dicker, he's the one that kicked the field goal that beat OU a couple of years ago when was that 18? I can't remember what year that would have been. Well, the years all together.
Yeah, it was the year Murray almost rescued the game, 18.
Yeah, 18. So yeah, I remember that. But Dicker the kicker. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, Gabe Burchich, it's amazing. He didn't start his first season at OU. He was the backup kicker. And then he just exploded when there was a midseason change because the former is it Sutherland, Caleb Sutherland?
Yes.
Yeah. So he was dismissed from the team, and then Burkich took over and just took the reins and ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
And his career at Oklahoma was pretty huge. I mean, kick a game winner. He had the game-winning kick. He's had a game winner. He's hit some big kicks. Will a team take a shot on him? And his personality. I mean, you remember the interviews, Guerin, with him. And he was a unique personality too. He off Stoops a lot. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets picked or not.
Yeah.
I think he'd get maybe a look from somebody, I think that Tulane game alone last year showed up his range, at least kicking 350-yard field goals. That should appeal to someone. But I would have guessed there'd been more than one Big 12 kicker getting at least maybe sneaking into one of those mock drafts.
Let's see. Marquise Hayes, Tyrese Robinson, Isaiah Thomas, Memorial Charger, Tulsa Public Proud. They were day 3. I've seen Brian Asamoah as sort of a mid-round guy, maybe on the edge of day 2, 3rd or 4th round.
Yep.
I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. I've
got one more name.
Who am I missing?
Kennedy Brooks.
Thank you. Yeah, Kennedy Brooks.
He's
could be
projected as like a 6th or 7th round pick. But
yeah.
I don't know that he's going to go light the world on fire. But I wonder if, kind of like his college career, he may go just under the radar because nothing about him super pops physically or whatever else. But I think that was the case for a few years in Norman, where he was never looked at as the guy, but quietly turned in 3,000-yard rushing seasons. And so I do wonder, if maybe there will be a team that finds him and in him finds a pretty serviceable NFL running back.
No, I'm glad you brought up Brooks. I've forgotten.
Another one I want to look at is Dillon Turner-Yell. I mean, he's been projected pretty decent too. And Turner-Yell, we see how these safeties, these defensive backs, their pro careers. I mean, look at some of these guys from last year that played. That made Trey Norwood. What Trey Norwood was able to do. You wonder what kind of pro he was in, and he was suiting up for the Steelers. I mean, you're seeing some of these defensive backs make that transition from OU to the secondaries of NFL teams. And Dillon Turner-Yell is another player. I think he's going to get drafted. It may be a little late, but I think he's a guy that can bring some value to a lot of franchises.
You know what? Because of the portal, a fun thing for fans to do is to count the number of former players who are also picked. And you could actually stack a decent number of ex-Sooners. I've seen Calcaterra. I've seen TJ Pledger. And I've seen Charleston Rambo as, again, we're talking about day 3, but anymore, if you're a coach, you probably want to see as many just, products on draft boards as transfer products. Probably means you're doing the accounting wrong. But those are other names to keep an eye on this weekend.
Got one bit of trivia for you guys. If you've got the stomach for it.
Always.
Can you guys, and maybe this is an obvious answer as a guy who wasn't, here all these years, but can you think of do you know the last year where none of the in-state FBS schools, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State, when those schools went without a first-round pick the last time that happened?
When was Zaven picked? Is that last year?
That was
last
year.
That was last year.
I would have said last year until Zaven Collins flashed into my head. Oh man. Well, OSU hasn't had a first rounder in a minute.
It's been a little while.
So really you got to be thinking in terms of Oklahoma terms here, OU terms.
First overall picks in 19 and 18.
Who was a 19 first rounder?
Tyler.
Oh, that was 19's draft.
Yeah, 2019 draft.
Okay, no, 2020 then.
Or 2020.
Who would have been the OU's 2020 first rounder? Oh, was Creed Humphrey first rounder?
I don't think so.
I can tell you this: there was someone in 2020. I'll check back on my. Oh, it's CD was one of them.
CD Lamb.
Okay.
And Kenneth Murray.
Kenneth Murray. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was a good draft. Boy, there's probably some fans that are listening right now screaming at us the year while we're sitting here trying to figure this out.
I'm going to say it's not. I'm going to say it's not as far back as we. How about 2016?
I was going to say 15.
It's 2017, guys. That was the year Joe Mixon went in round 2.
Okay.
And he was followed by D.D. Westbrook and Samaje Perine, and OSU had a couple of guys, but there was no first rounder in 2017.
See, if you ask me about Westbrook, I'd almost say late first round, but he wasn't, was he? He was not a second round guy?
Let me go back and make sure I'm right.
No, no. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah, D.D. wasn't. Yeah. So.
I remember
Mixon at the 48.
I remember Mixon falling to the second round because I remember ESPN coverage of Mixon being drafted, and it was all about the Amelia Molitor incident. It had nothing to do with what he did on the field. So I do remember that starkly. Interesting. All right. Well,
okay. Let me ask you this real quick. Since Eli had some trivia, let me give you a little gambling of that. Play with the numbers a little bit. Over under players drafted. There was 11 combine OU players. What's your over under on draft picks? If I gave you let's go 6.5. Would you go under or over?
I'd go slightly over to 7.
Okay.
I'd probably lean there too. 6.5 is the perfect number, Eric, because that's the number I was thinking of as a good over under. I think I hit the over 2 because I think that hinges on Gabe Burkich potentially.
Well, 2 names we haven't mentioned was Jeremiah Hall and Mike Woods. Those are 2 others. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could sneak up on the board too. So let's go 6.5. I think we're all going to go over. If I had to pick, I'd say 7, just as a fair number. I'll go over. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just 6 too. So we'll look at this next week, see how we did.
Yep, let's do that. We should probably talk softball next week. Isn't Bedlam softball next weekend?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Eric's right. Yeah, and Eli's still writing quite a bit about Cowgirl softball, so he could actually give us some perspective from OSU side of that. I'm going to call that a pretty big series.
I think next week needs to be a softball special.
So Eli will do a softball trivia. Eric will have quotes and notes from Gasso Allo and Jennings and the crew, and we'll also look back on the draft and see if in fact we all hit the over on 6.5 Sooners taken. What am I? Real quick, I'm supposed to do something about All World, and we want to make folks happy back in the corporate office. So this is me saying, you can get your tickets for the All World Awards on sale at allworldawards.com. The date of the ceremony and the program is August 2nd. It's actually a big deal, and I'm glad we're doing it again because it gives us a chance to honor those who are often overlooked in the course of the crazy sports calendar. Not just the high school athletes in the Metro. It's not just football and basketball. Everything gets covered. We give awards and recognition to every sport in the Metro. It really is a cool thing that we try to put on with the help of our friends at Bill Knight. Renaissance Tulsa Hotel and Convention Center. is the location. That's off of 169. And again, it's August 2nd. Get your tickets at allworldawards.com. I've done my due diligence. Fellas, anything else, or can we turn everyone loose? We good?
Do we know who's hosting the All World Awards?
Well, the speaker is going to be Rod Thompson, former University of Tulsa player, and I think he's better known as Bryce Thompson's dad these days. So Rod's going to, he's excellent. He'll do a good job keeping it real, as the kids say, to the kids, because that's what this is all about. So yeah, Rod is going to be the keynote speaker in the footsteps of Mike Boynton, who did a swell job last year for us. All right, that's it for this week. I'll be back with Eli and Eric next week on TulsaWorld.com and on the pod, courtesy of Apple, Google, and Spotify. Have a good week, folks.